biceps take up about 25% of the arms, right? The triceps do take up a larger portion of the arms. If you rewind and go back to our past muscle PhDs, or if you go on Facebook Live and you kind of look at some of our old muscle PhD academies, we talk about triceps, right? But we're really going to talk about today specifically the biceps, which again are about 25% of the arms. Okay, so now we'll start with anatomy of the biceps and kind of overall function, right? So biceps, two heads to the biceps, right? So you have what some people talk about, the long head or lateral head, and that's the bicep peak. And then you have sort of inner bicep thickness, and that's what we call the short head of the biceps. So biceps essentially, they cross the shoulder joint, and so they originate basically by crossing the shoulder joint on the outer part of the scapula. In fact, if you feel right here, you can kind of feel like a little hook, and the biceps will originate up here, and then they actually insert on the outer part of the forearm. That's very, very important you understand. So the biceps originate here, and they insert on the outer part of the forearm, and that outer part twists, okay? So it's very, very important. So because you insert in the outer part of the forearm, the biceps, essentially, if my hand's down like this, they twist the arm upward. They twist the arm upward. So of course, everyone knows they flex the arm, but they also twist the arm upward. And that's called supination. And because they cross the shoulder joint, they can also lift the shoulder up, okay? So anytime you're lifting the shoulder up, or you're turning the hand up, or you're flexing the arm, you're engaging the biceps, okay? So up is supination, flexing the arm, but also lifting the shoulder up. All of that is supination. In fact, like sometimes when you're doing like bench press, sometimes you get like a pain here, and you say, well, it's bicep tendonitis. Well, the biceps cross the shoulder joint, so they can get tendonitis when you do stuff like bench press, for example, okay? Because their shoulder, they flex the shoulder. So that's biceps anatomy. So when you're lifting, any motion, again, where it's mainly a flexor, so any flexing movement is going to hit the biceps. But again, you can also think of them as anytime you're doing this, you're hitting the biceps, and anytime you're supinating, you're hitting the biceps. So let's get more into that. So next thing I want to talk about is muscle fiber makeup, right? So what are the biceps made of? Well, the biceps themselves, you have fast twitch muscle fibers, you have slow twitch muscle fibers. And the biceps are mainly fast twitch muscle fibers. So, or not mainly, but 60%. So yes, primarily. About 60% fast or type 2 muscle fibers, and about 40% of the slower fibers. So when you're talking about more of the fast twitch muscle fibers, what does that mean? Well, it basically means that those are used for high speed movements and heavier weights. High speed and heavier weights. So probably what you're talking about, that's important because it talks about how fast you should go when you lift. So number one is you're going to want to lift in a fairly heavy range, probably anywhere from 6 to 12 reps for the biceps. I wouldn't recommend doing like 1 to 3 reps, but anywhere from 6 to 12 reps heavy, and a little bit longer rest periods, like anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes, 60% of the time. Okay, the speed that you're going to go is as fast as you can go while being controlled, because faster speeds activate the biceps. Now, a lot of people go, well, don't you need to be controlled? I'm not saying do this. I'm saying lift the weight, let the weight dictate the speed. So if I'm lifting something that I can only lift for 8 reps, by the time I get to rep 6, I can't lift the weight fast. But I'm not purposely going slow, because the biceps are primarily a fast twitch muscle group. Now the other 40% of the time, yes, you should be focusing on more slower focused contractions, intent, focusing on the muscle, and lifting probably anywhere from 12 to 15 reps, or even 12 to 20 reps, and maybe even sometimes higher than that. But 12 to 20 reps is going to hit more of the slow twitch fibers, and also doing drop sets, supersets. All of those things are important. So higher repetitions, more slow and controlled, that's going to hit the slow twitch muscle fibers. You're going to do that about 40% of the time, right? So, you know, if you have 5 workouts, you're going to hit 2 of them with higher reps, 12 to 20 reps. The others you're going to hit probably anywhere from a 6 to 12 repetition range. Also, when you do the high rep stuff with the biceps, shorter rest periods, 30 seconds, a minute, because you're targeting those slow twitch fibers, and they're very fatigue resistant. So right when they start to recover, you got to hit them again, okay? So that's kind of the point. So next thing that we're going to talk about on the biceps is the fact, and Ben Pakulski talks a lot about this, should you hit a muscle from different angles, right? Turns out that maximum activation of the biceps happens differently on different portions of the lift depending on what you do. So if I'm doing more of like a standing barbell curl, I actually get a lot of the maximal activation happens near the second half of the lift. So when you're lifting the weight, focusing on like actually I like cable curls for this, because you can get tension throughout the whole range of motion, but you get more tension, you actually get higher muscle activation on that second half of the lift. So that standing curls are good for that second half and that squeeze, okay? However, preacher curls, you get the highest amount of muscle activation on the bottom portion of the lift, okay? So if you're trying to create a lot of stress on the bottom portion of the lift, you're going to want to do more preacher curls, right? But if you want more activation like on the top when you're squeezing, you're trying to get that bicep peak, that's going to be more standing curls, and I would really recommend getting a lot of cable curl work for that. So again, stressing the lower portion, preacher curls, stretching the top of the portion of the movement is going to be more standing curls, standing cable curls. So that's kind of that component of things. Now, moving on from that, the problem is this. You have to understand this, is we're going to talk now mechanical advantage of training the biceps. Mechanical advantage means that, again, just like mechanically, you have the greatest advantage mechanically at a certain portion of the lift. And for the biceps themselves, basically, you have the greatest mechanical advantage when you hit about 90 degrees, okay? So you can see that right here at 90 degrees arm flexion, I have the greatest mechanical advantage. So a lot of times you see guys load up the bar with a ton of weight, right? And they do partial reps. Okay, the reason why why are they not going all the way down? Because it's harder when you're all the way down because you don't have as much of a mechanical advantage. So one, we don't recommend that, you know, unless you're using it as a technique to burn out, and I'll talk about that in a second. But to start the weight, you likely want to start all the way on the bottom. You have mechanical advantage right here. That means the weight's easiest from here to here. Well, the problem is that means that where are you growing? You're really only growing on the first half of the rep. It's just easy and you're just using momentum on the second half. How do we fix that? The answer is you use bands. Think about a rubber band. When you stretch a rubber band, it gets harder as you pull, as there's more and more tension. So when you're doing bicep curls, if you can put bands on the bar, they're unloaded on the bottom. As you come up, there's tension on the bands, and they get more and more and more tension. And so basically, as you come up, the bands get harder and harder. That's important because mechanically you have an advantage on the second half. So if you can use bands, then basically what that means is that you'll actually be able to, your window of opportunity to grow is going to be all throughout the entire lift instead of just the first half of the lift. Does it make sense, everybody? So again, you can, there's a couple techniques that we can use. Number one, we can use bands. Number two, if I'm training with like Andy, for example, if I'm training with Andy, then say that I'm lifting weights and I don't have bands, so I'm lifting on the second half. What can Andy do? He's going to push down on my arm. Go ahead. And now it's harder on that second half of the lift. So basically, you can, right when it's getting hard, the partner can assist, can add tension on the second half of the lift. And that's another way that you can actually get gains is right when it gets easier, your partner starts to resist on that second half because you have a mechanical advantage. A third way that you can utilize this mechanical advantage concept is that basically when I go to failure, I still could do reps on the second half. So when I fail, what basically I can do is I can go to failure full range of motion and then just get the weight up halfway and go to failure on the second half of the motion. I'm taking advantage of the mechanical advantage, and now I'm targeting muscle fibers I might have otherwise not targeted, okay? So again, right when I go to failure on full range of motion, I can actually keep lifting on the second half because I have a mechanical advantage, and it allows me to keep the weight going. So to summarize that part up, mechanical advantage on second half. One thing I can do is use bands, which increase tension on the second half. Second thing I can do is I'm working out with Andy or Paul. I can have them add weight on the second half manually with their hands. Or third, when I go to failure here, I can keep going to failure with partial reps on the second half because I'm stronger. So those are the three advice that I have on that. Now, what we talked about when we showed our infographic yesterday, which was a super cool infographic, was one of my favorite infographics, was basically talking about a muscle most people don't talk about, and that's the brachialis. A lot of people come up to me and go, I just want that bicep peak. Like, I want my biceps to just peak higher when I flex, right? How do you do that? Turns out that basically you have the biceps themselves, you have the triceps, say, here, you have the biceps here, and wedged in between them you have the brachialis. Now the brachialis is like wedged in between, but when you're super lean, you can kind of see that 3D look coming out. So that's kind of an important concept. So when you talk about like the brachialis, again, it's right in between, and if I can train the brachialis, which is in between, the triceps and the biceps, basically what that means is that it'll push my bicep peak up. So brachialis is 18% of the arm, so you should try and target it. But two, because wedged in between my bicep peak, it'll physically push the bicep peak upward. So basically you want to train the brachialis because one, it's 18% of the arm, so it'll make your arms overall look bigger. Two, it'll give you that 3D look from the side, you know, and then the next thing is it'll push your bicep peak up. So how do I train the brachialis? Remember, the biceps themselves insert on the lateral part of the forearm. So the biceps here, but the brachialis inserts here on the middle part of the forearm, okay? Now, because the biceps are here on the lateral part of the forearm, if I rotate my hand around, see, I rotate my hand around, imagine the tendon here, it rotates around, it gets stuck in between the middle forearm muscle and the out forearm bone and the outer forearm bone. So this is the lateral forearm bone, the outer forearm bone, the inner forearm bone. When I twist my arm, the tendon of the biceps gets stuck. I can't use the bicep as well. What does that mean? There's more pressure on the brachialis. So if I do reverse curls, anytime I'm doing reverse curls, what that does is it lowers the mechanical advantage of the biceps and it puts more pressure on the brachialis. So now reverse curls and hammer curls are basically going to cause more activation of the brachialis, less activation of the biceps. And now I can target that 3D look in the biceps and it'll help me get that bicep peak. So reverse curls target the brachialis and give me that. So it's super cool, I think. Now, some people ask me, you said, all right, Doc, this is how I actually hit the bicep peak, to hit the brachialis to force it up. How do I hit that inner biceps? Like, how do I get that inner bicep thickness, right? So basically, the way to do that is the biceps, again, are a supinator. So they twist the palm upward. Turns out that the inner biceps is the better supinator. So it turns the palm up better than the outer biceps. So if I do bicep curls with a twist, so if I start my hand kind of neutral, and as I come up, I twist the hand, the palm up, all the way up, so kind of neutral or semi, even starting semi not neutral, and I twist the palm up as I'm lifting, that is essentially, those twisting curls is going to hit that inner bicep. The other thing is when you come up, squeeze, turn your pinkies inward, that's going to get that inner biceps. So you can have thick inner biceps like Andy over here. So, okay, so that, yeah, dude, exactly. So let's sum up all these lessons. Bottom line is that the biceps, two heads. You have the outer head, the inner head. The outer head's that bicep peak, the inner head's bicep thickness. They cross the shoulder joint and they insert on the outer forearm muscle. That means that they primarily flex the arm, they turn the palm upward, and they flex the shoulder up. So anytime you're getting creative in the weight room on the biceps, those three things are going to be very important, okay? Flexing the shoulder, twisting the palm up, and flexing the arm. The next thing that we talked about with the biceps was that, and then I'll get to your questions after this. The next thing I talked about with the biceps is that they actually are about 60% fast twitch, 40% slow. So 60% of the time, you want to train the biceps in a 6 to 12 rep range, 2 to 3 minutes rest, and train at a relatively faster speed. 40% of the time, train past 12 repetitions, 12 to 20 repetitions, maybe even high reps like 30, short rest periods like 30 to 60 seconds, okay? Then the next thing that we talked about is that the biceps, hitting them at different angles are important. Preacher curls will have the most difficulty or muscle activation on the bottom portion of the lift, where standing curls will have the greatest muscle activation on the top of the lift. So hit the biceps from the bottom angles and on the top angles. Next thing that we talked about was the fact that the biceps have the greatest mechanical advantage at 90 degrees, which is about here. So at around this point when you're lifting is when it's easiest. You can overcome that by having partner resisted lifting. So like right when I'm on the second half, say I'm training with Paul, Paul's going to assist on that second half. Or I could use bands. Bands will increase tension on the way up. Finally, if I go to failure on bicep curls, I can do half curls to finish the weight off and target some muscle fibers I might have not otherwise targeted, taking advantage of that mechanical advantage. Then we talked about targeting the inner biceps. It's important that I do twisting curls, because turning the pinky up and squeezing on the way up, that's going to hit the inner biceps. And then finally we talked about the brachialis. Brachialis, the biceps don't work well when you turn your palm down, so reverse curls are going to be very important for hitting 18% of the arm, which is a brachialis, and the brachialis is going to push the biceps up and give you that peak. So guys, that is the lesson. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer your questions. But while I'm answering your questions, before you're doing that, make sure if you guys are on Facebook Live, hit share and hit like. So share that, share the love. And also if you're on Facebook or Instagram, turn on post notification on Instagram, and also on Facebook, turn on notifications for Facebook. There's instructions on the front page of that as well. So now guys, ask your questions, ask them away.
I don't ever get sore on training biceps, no matter if I focus on intensity or volume. What can I do to get sore?
So Mad says I can't get sore. So here's the thing. A lot of guys train their biceps a lot. There's a concept known as a repeated bout effect, which basically means that if I keep training, my muscles basically can't get damaged as much, okay? One of the reasons why is particularly where we get the most damage is when we're lengthening the muscle. What happens is it just gets very resistant to that damage, and it's very hard to cause damage anymore. Now, do you need muscle damage to grow? Not necessarily. But is it a part of muscle growth? Yes. So the eccentric, the lowering portion, is what causes damage. So one way that you can increase damage is going to be forced eccentrics. So that's saying like I'm training with Paul here, and this is Paul. If I'm lifting up here, Paul's going to push down on my hand, okay, on the way down, because I can lift more on the way down than I can lift up. So if I lift up, especially if I'm doing like a preacher curl, and Paul presses down on the way down, because I can lift more eccentrically, that's going to cause a lot of damage eccentrically, and that should get you sore, and it'll cause the damage that you're seeking. So again, force negative is going to be a great way to do it. Ali Magdi says, how do I get my biceps longer? Unfortunately, Ali, you can't get your biceps longer because the insertion can't be changed. However, you can kind of create some of the illusion of having a longer biceps by training this muscle here on the forearm, which is known as the brachioradialis. So brachioradialis kind of looks like it's extending the biceps, and the way you train that is going to be a lot of hammer curls and a lot of reverse curls. That'll make the biceps look like they're extending because the brachialis crosses over the forearm here. So that's one recommendation I have.
Whoops. Protein adaptation.
We know that the body adapts to high protein intake. Is there any guideline which tells us how long this adaptation takes? You adapt to diets pretty strongly in 2 weeks, but you also basically in 2 weeks' time you're going to adapt really hardcore to things like to dieting. So in 7 days you're really starting to catch on. In 2 weeks you're probably fully adapted. So basically just keep that in mind, and maybe one way you could avoid that is only having high protein days 2 to 3 times a week. But definitely after 7 days, taper that protein down so you don't get used to it. Okay, so next questions is frequency for biceps. I think that you could train the biceps at least 3 times a week, and really, to be honest, like maybe even close to every day. So probably you could train them anywhere from 5-6 days a week. But in the same token, if you're going to train them hard, super hard, probably 3 days a week.
Great question. Tip to beat skinny genetics.
Okay, tip to beat skinny genetics. Great question, and that's from George. So basically, here's the thing, George. Skinny genetics are a blessing and a curse. The blessing is the fact that it's going to be hard for you to gain fat, okay? The curse is that it's also going to be hard for you to gain muscle. So my advice to you is, again, you're going to have to increase your calories. So try increase them by 500 per day. You need to monitor your weight so you're putting on at least a pound a week. If that's not working, up your calories 500 more. If that's not working, up at 500 more until you gain a half to 1 pound a week. And I think that's really what it comes down to. If you have to eat 4,000 calories a day, George, eat 4,000 calories a day. If that's not enough, eat 5,000 calories a day.
But when you plateau, what do you have to do?
When you plateau, you need to eat more. But
strategically, I mean.
Strategically. Now let me say this, George. If at some point in time you'll need to lower your calories so you stay insulin sensitive, so you lower them back to maintenance. I'm gonna start working on my MS in exercise science. Good. That is Elias. Yeah, Elias. I'm gonna start working on my MS exercise science. Way to go, man! Great stuff. Do you hold clinics for students or internships? We are going to be holding clinics. We do have internships. They're competitive internships with full interviews and everything like that. But man, they're freaking cool. So people will come in here and literally get the top science humanly possible, and it's always exciting with the greatest technology. So if you're interested in internships, you're going to want an email.
I'll type it up here then.
Andy's going to type it up, but also just say it too.
Yeah, just say it.
Where do you want them to?
My SPI email.
Oh,
A Barninger at the ASPI.
A Barninger at the ASPI.com. So that's ABARNINGER at the ASPI.com, and we will type that in. Andy's going to go online and type that as A Barninger at the ASPI.com. Danielle says, aren't reverse grip?
Oh, my bad.
Aren't reverse easy curl bars not recommended? I definitely recommend them. Wrist pain, primarily in my case. So yeah, Danielle. So yeah, if you have wrist pain, then I don't recommend them for you. You might try more neutral, So in other words, you might try more hammer curls if you're trying to hit that brachialis.
Does the thickness of the bar account for anything in regards to muscle hypertrophy for forearm and or bicep?
The thickness of the bar is primarily going to hit the forearms. So, I think if you want thick forearms, having a thick bar is going to help. It won't necessarily make the biceps bigger.
I say that because a lot of people are asking about mad grips.
I think they're great for having thick vascular forearms.
Ready?
Yeah.
How about total sets for biceps? This is our friend Dave from yesterday.
Oh, Dave. Good question, Dave. So total sets for biceps. To be honest, you can really smash the biceps with there for 8 to 12 sets. Every once in a while, yeah, you can go ahead and bang that up to 20 sets. But to be honest, if you're focusing really hard, I think 8 to 12, with focusing more on frequency is going to be good. Lady Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Yeah, that's a cool name. That says the frequency you talked about, does it work for a female too? Yeah, absolutely. Lady CC Sunshine. Okay, got it. Lady CC Sunshine, yes, it works for females as well. So
Scroll here.
it's all relative,
Scroll.
right? How do you gain?
People been asking.
Okay, cool.
This one.
How do you gain muscle mass a lot faster without losing weight? Well, you got to eat a lot. Or how do I gain the muscle mass in my biceps without hurting myself, but seeing good results? Well, I mean, Landon, I think you got to focus on having good form. Landon, make sure you have good form, and then you won't hurt yourself, and don't go too heavy. And I think that's key. How many times a week and to what intensity should I train my calves for them to get big? If you're having, Matt, if you're having a hard time getting your calves to grow, train them every single day and vary the intensity every single day and hit the calves from every angle, from a different angle every single day. Tom says, Tom Batson says, when's the website coming out? Good question, buddy. I would say in March we'll launch the website.
Working on it right now.
We're working on it right now, actually.
This one right here.
Cardio versus calorie restriction when cutting. Which is greater in regards to maintaining muscle? So Mads, traditional cardio, like long duration cardio, you'll lose muscle similar to dieting. So they're equivalent. In contrast, but the cardio gets you in better shape. But the thing is, long duration cardio plus dieting, you'll lose even more muscle mass. Because cardio by itself interferes with muscle. But I'm not saying cardio is bad. I'm just saying factor that in. High intensity cardio, on the other hand, will not interfere with muscle growth. In fact, our lab found that it made it grow. Muscles grow. And finally, if that's moderate intensity cardio, but if you're just walking, it's so low intensity that it's not going to hurt anything. It'll just be like calorie restriction. How do I get my waist smaller fast? You're going to want to diet down, like lower your calories and do cardio. And if you want to make the appearance of your waist look smaller, work on the side delts and work on the outer quad sweep, and that'll give the appearance of having a smaller waist. When I diet for a show, I lose thickness. I lose thickness in my muscle of my legs compared to the top body. What can I do to help me keep that? Ali, I think that for that fullness, really a lot of it's muscle glycogen or the carb stores, and have muscles that are fuller. I recommend more higher volume training. Higher volume training will increase the vascularity, the capillaries in the muscle, the nutrients in the muscle, which will make them full. So if you're just like powerlifting, it's not going to have as much fullness.
Do you suggest
one more question?
Yep.
Creatine or protein intake immediately after you work out?
Both. Creatine and protein immediately after your workout is going to be important.
How much?
Oh, so creatine about 5 grams, and I'd have about 30 to 40 grams of protein at least post-workout, more of a fast-digesting protein. I do think nutrient timing is important because the only study that's ever been done in athletes who are bodybuilders where it matters by Paul Cribb actually showed it was very beneficial. So